Hi, I'm Kimberly, and today we're going to introduce turn on the forehand. The definition of turn on the forehand in the USDF Glossary of Terms: this movement teaches the rider the use and effect of the forward and sideways driving aids. It teaches the horse obedience and response to the aids. As he turns his hindquarter around the forehand in walk steps, it improves coordination and brings about suppleness. Turn on the forehand teaches the elementary coordination of the aids essential to further development of the rider. The turn on the forehand prepares the horse and rider for leg yielding. Both exercises can be used in a combination to provide the rider with effective gymnastics schooling that creates a supple and willing horse. If you are a trail rider or show trail classes or working equitation, this is a maneuver you will use to open a gate. It may also be asked for in other pattern or test classes if you ride dressage or English equitation. But beyond being a handy tool, it is also a skill that will benefit both the horse and rider, as it is helpful for suppling, increasing attentiveness, core activation, improved clarity of the aids, and longitudinal balance. Even though a turn on the forehand does shift the weight to the shoulders, which is typically avoided in most of our endeavors with horses, I believe there is still a great benefit to it. For a horse to become his most athletic self, he must not only be aware of all parts of his body, but have access to them and allow us to have access to them as well. In fact, I think this most basic of exercises is so important that is almost always one of the very first things I ask of a horse, both in hand and under saddle, or with an unbacked youngster, to assess its understanding of pressure and release and its level of sensitivity. In this first segment, I'm showing what I would expect from a horse with limited or no prior work in this skill. At first, I simply want to help the horse understand that when I apply pressure, either through body language or physical touch, that he yields the hindquarters away. I keep one hand on the halter to ensure the horse's front end stays relatively stationary. Then, using the end of my lead rope or a long whip, I tap the hip. Tap, tap, tap until the horse moves. I slowly increase the pressure of my taps until a response is offered. The moment the horse begins to move his feet away, cease all pressure and praise. Very early, I'll often use treats and then a 1 minute or 30-second break between each question to really allow the horse to process the material. It's not uncommon for a completely green horse to push themselves into the pressure at first. Because that quickly becomes a safety issue, if that occurs, I will give a fairly significant swat to the butt with my whip or lead to entice the horse to reconsider coming into my space. I always encourage handlers to wear gloves and a helmet whenever you're interacting with your horses. Some horses may even try to run into or over you, so always pay close attention and be ready to correct them to back out of your space. I prefer a rope halter with a good heavy lead rope and snap because it allows you to have good control of the lead. Flimsy ropes lead to sloppy communication and you just end up pulling them around. Once the horse has the basic understanding of moving the hind end away from me when being asked, I will begin to ask for greater coordination and precision. This is an instance where more is not more, but rather less is more. My student Margaret has coined my approach on this as the rule of the onesies. Ask for one step and ideally receive one balanced and coordinated step at a time in response. Make sure your horse is fully immobile in the halt and waiting patiently before you ask. In the second phase, I use my thumb or the blunt end of a whip to lightly touch the horse's side, approximately where my leg will be when I am asking from the saddle. As soon as the horse makes an effort to move away from the pressure, release the aid and praise. Soon they will understand what is expected and become more prompt and confident. If they do not respond to the light pressure, reinforce with a tap on the rump from the crop. Escalate some if they do not respond. But if you find yourself having to smack them with a whip, it should be concluded that they do not understand, and you should return to the previous phase and reestablish the quality of just moving them out of your space with the hindquarters when asked. Try to be slow and methodical until the horse has control and can begin and end the exercise without just swinging around. A swing or a scramble is a sign that they have lost balance, and you should go back to the single step at a time until the horse has regained his control or has an understanding that you don't want him to just throw himself sideways, but rather step purposefully over. Only then would I ask for 2 to 3 steps in sequence. As a former reiner, my demo horse today, 9-year-old Chicken Tinseltown, has always struggled with doing things in a controlled way. She is very sensitive, and her previous training rewarded quick reactions, so she tends to jump sideways even from the lightest touch. This has made maintaining balance in the lateral work especially difficult because in her effort to scramble to answer the question, she loses her coordination and balance. You'll see several times throughout this video where she overreacts and falls either forward and back and loses the clarity of the steps. I use repetition to ensure my horse truly understands what it is that I am asking her to do. Again, as soon as she makes an effort to answer correctly, I release the aids and praise. This exercise is one I use almost daily as part of my warm-up since it helps her tune into me mentally as well as helps loosen her body in preparation for the work. It's important to note that when first adding this to your program, start with just a few minutes at a time. While this is low-intensity work, it can make them sore if you go overboard. 5 to 10 minutes a day, or 5 to 7 times in each direction, is a good place to start. It's also best to speak to your vet or body worker before adding any new things to your horse's program. Under saddle, I basically repeat everything I've done in hand, starting with the basic understanding of move away, followed by refining and adding precision so I have control of each individual step. Balance is always my priority at this point. To begin, take a small amount of flexion just in the jaw and pull. Remember, flexion does not include the whole neck, just the jaw and pull. You only need to see the eyelashes and the nostrils, not the whole side of the face. The horse should remain primarily straight through the neck and withers. Your torso should be tall and toned, but not clenched. Your legs should be relaxed down into the stirrup. Make a mental note. You should not be braced or clenched in your toes, ankles, or knees. Your glutes should be in postural tone, but not squeezed so tight you're perching. Conversely, you should not be slumped without any tone in your posture at all. Here I'm demonstrating a common mistake. I'm holding on the leg too long so she runs sideways. I'm holding the rein too tight and pulling back so she can't step forward clearly. I'm overbending the neck and leaning over the side of her, causing both of us to drop in the hip and lose balance, which causes her to swing. I have my students look to the horse's inside ear, which helps them position their body and hips in the correct spot. Your outside hip and shoulder should come slightly forward, and your inside hip and shoulder should come slightly back. Emphasis on slightly. You saw a moment ago what happens when I do too much. When the horse is ready and waiting, apply a light touch of your calf, not your heel, which will pull your leg up and cause you to collapse on that side. Put it on his side, right behind the girth where you practice touching from the ground. Your reins should maintain a soft contact, but don't pull the inside rein. At the end here, I continue with an exercise to mobilize the shoulders and help her shift her weight back over her hind end again. I have asked her to adduct or bring into the body her shoulders. This skill will eventually progress into turn on the haunches, which is a more advanced movement than turn on the forehand, and that we'll discuss in a future video. I finish with rein back before continuing on with the rest of my ride. In classical dressage, a turn on the forehand asks the horse to continue in a clear walk with him, so he will need to march with the front feet, but you don't want your horse walking forward or backwards out of place. It should stay balanced, stepping, and steady throughout the movement. It should be more of a marching pivot. As when practicing in hand, don't punish or overcorrect for some movement in the feet. Just make sure it's controlled and thoughtful. I imagine my horse being inside a hula hoop on the ground, and she continued her march within that, her hind end circling around the hula hoop. Some sports may call for a pivot, which, as the name implies, the outside foreleg will remain planted. Make sure you know the rules for whatever competition you are participating in and adjust accordingly. This is a skill I practice with her regularly, in addition to basic turns around the haunches, rein backs, and leg yields, as a way to get her to slow down and focus on what is being asked and to become more aware of her body and her responses. Because it loosens and supples, as well as hones attentiveness, it's an excellent warm-up exercise too. I hope you found this video lesson to be helpful. Try it with your horse and let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear from you. Enjoy the ride.